So we've been solving inequalities, but we haven't solved compound inequalities. Compound means it's composed of two or more elements. So what we're going to actually do is squish two inequalities together. There's actually two ways you can do that. One way is what is called an AND inequality, AND. This is an example of an AND inequality, and you can tell because it's just one big inequality with two symbols in it. You can also write an AND inequality by just using the word AND. So we have two separate ones, and we put an AND in there. You can also have an OR inequality. And if you have an OR, then it's got to have the word OR. There is no other way to write it. We'll talk about what each one of those means in a second. But first, how do we solve it? Well, what we need to do is split this into two parts. I'm going to write my answer however my problem was written. So my answer is going to look something like this. But for right now, I need to split it apart. And you always split it at the symbols. So 4 less than W plus 3. And then when I get to my second symbol, I'm actually going to split it right there and then pretend like this part doesn't exist. And we're just going to solve that. So I have 4 less than W plus 3. And then for the other one, I start on the right and I do the same thing. I work my way from the right. There's 5 less than or equal to 3 plus W. There's a new symbol. So we're going to cut it off right there and then pretend like this part doesn't exist. So we've got W plus 3 is less than or equal to 5. And then we got to solve both of these. So for this one, I want to know what W is. So I need to get rid of this plus 3. To get rid of the plus 3, I'm going to minus 3. Both sides of the sign. 4 minus 3 is 1. Keep my less than. 3's cancel out, and I have W. Now, I want to keep this right here because remember, my answer is going to look just like my original problem. So since the W was in the middle, I want it to be right here. But I also want to graph this. And since it's easier to graph if it's flipped, I'm going to go ahead and flip it. So if I flip it, the W goes on the left. I change my symbol to greater than because we flipped it 1. All right, I'm not actually going to put it on the graph because we're going to have to do something else with it. So I'm going to do W greater than 1. Since there's no little equal to bar, it's going to be an empty circle at 1. And it's going to be greater than, so it goes to the right. Okay, let's come back over here and let's solve this W plus 3 is less than 5. I want to get W by itself. Since it's plus 3, we're going to minus 3. That gives me W. It's less than or equal to 5 minus 3 is 2. And since it's W is on the left, I don't need to change it or flip anything. Less than or equal to means I'm going to go to 2, and I'm going to put a solid dot, and we're going to go left. Now, to make the graph, what we're going to do is extend this dot up. So there's going to be an empty dot right here. I'm going to extend this dot up. So there's going to be a solid dot right here. And because it is an AND, we're going to write down the parts where it overlaps, which is connecting these two dots. So my graph is an empty circle with a little line and a dot, and it's just the two places where the two little lines overlap, and that's why I drew them down here, because I want to put my actual answer on the graph. I'm not going to ask you, IXL doesn't have a draw the graph one. What you really need to do is put the answer. Well, the answer, we need to recombine these two. So we split this W plus 3, basically, put it here and here. So now we have these two W's. So I had a 1, I had a less than, then I had a W. Then over here I had a W. Well, this W is going to be the same one as right here. So then I'm just going to continue with my sign, less than equal to 2. All right, there is my answer. This is what I would type in IXL. So I split this into two parts, solved each part individually, and then recombined it where we had this, ooh, that's a wrong line. Recombined it where we had this shared W down here. This one is written as an and with the word and. That means my answer is going to have the word and those are probably a little bit easier to write. So we're going to write y minus 1 is less than 2, and we're going to solve that. So plus 1 to get rid of the minus 1, and I have y is less than 3. So I'm going to come up here, empty circle, go to the left, put a little arrow. Empty circle because there's no line on it. All right, for the second one, I have y plus 2 is greater than or equal to 1. Since it's plus 2, we're going to minus 2 on both sides. That gives me y, nothing to change my sign, so greater than or equal to 1 minus 2 is negative 1. So if I want to graph that, I'm going to go to negative 1. It's a filled-in circle because it's got the line on it. Because it's greater than, my line goes this way. When I want to graph this, let me just do this in blue. The green was kind of hard to see. So I'm going to extend this dot up to negative 1. I'm going to extend this dot up to 3. And then because there's this overlap right here, that's where my graph actually is. So ands are basically finding where this one is and this one is. So where they both are, where they're shared. Now for my answer, I need an and in here. So I've got these two separate answers, but because it was and, we need to put an and in there. Okay. There's my answer. And I'm writing my answer so it matches the original problem. All right, let's do one that's way fancier. So again, this is an and, I can tell because it's shared. So I would go over here until there's a second symbol, which is right there. So I would ignore all this and write that down as an equation. So that's going to be d minus 3 is less than 6d plus 12. And then I need to solve this. This is the smallest variable, so I'm going to get rid of it. So I'm going to subtract d from both sides. I'm going to bring down the negative 3. 6d minus 1d gives me 5d plus 12. Now we get the d by itself, so I'm going to subtract 12, subtract 12. Negative 3 minus 12 makes negative 15. 5d, that cancels out, so just 5d. Divide by 5, divide by 5. I got negative 3 is less than d. Now I'm going to keep this, and I'm not even going to worry about graphing it this time because, like I said, IXL doesn't even ask you to graph. And normally I would want the d on the other side, but because we're going to recombine it in the middle, I want to keep the d on the right. All right, for the second one, we're going to ignore all this stuff over here. And we're going to go start at the right. You go to my second symbol, ignore all that. So we're going to solve 6d minus 12 is less than 2d plus 32. So I want to get rid of the smallest d, which is 2d. 6d minus 2d is 4d minus 12 is less than that 2d and minus 2d cancel out, and then there's 32. To get rid of the minus 12, we're going to plus 12. You know what? Why did I say that? That was a plus. Look at that. I wrote it down wrong. Plus. All right. That means that this, because it's plus, did not mean to erase all that. Let's fix this. Okay. So 6d minus 2d would be 4d. That's plus 12. Less than, that canceled out, and that's 32. Okay, now that's right. So we're going to get rid of the plus 12, and since it's plus, we're now going to subtract 4d less than 32 minus 12 is 20. Divide out the 4, and I have d is less than 5. 20 divided by 4 is 5. Now I want to recombine this. So these two separate d's right here are going to combine to be 1d. This was less than negative 3, and this was less than 5. So there is my answer. So what if it's an or? Well, if it's an or, it has to be written as an or. and you actually solve it exactly the same way. So I'm going to solve this one completely separate from this one. So I have 3 less than 3x, and that would be this first one. All I have to do is divide by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. And I actually want to flip this over. So x is greater than 1. So I would go down here to 1, empty circle, draw an arrow. Solve the other one. Negative 3x is greater than 9. Divide by negative 3 to get rid of it. That cancels and leaves me with x. Now I have to flip my sign because I just divided by a negative number. So less than 9 divided by negative 3 is negative 3. So now I'm going to come to negative 3, and it goes left because it's a less than. Neither one of them had an equal to bar on it, so they're both empty. For my answer, because this had the word or in it, my answer needs the word or. So this is going to be my answer. X is greater than 1 or x is less than or equal to 3. So what is the difference between an and an or? Well, look what happened when we graphed it. When we did ands, we were looking for the point where they overlapped. These don't overlap. In fact, they have a gap. So if I want to graph it, I just graph what I got. And there's no overlap. That's what makes it an or. It's either this one or that one. And we were looking for both places. And again, there's no other way to write it. It's got to have an or in it. So let's do this one more time. I'm going to start with this left one. 2y plus 2 is less than 12. We're going to solve this. I'm going to get rid of the plus 2 by minusing 2. It leaves me with 2y is less than 10. Divide by 2, divide by 2. Y is less than 5. For the other one, y minus 3 is greater than or equal to 2y. Okay, I have 2 y's. I have one on this side and one on this side. This one's smaller, so I'm going to subtract it and get rid of it. When I do, I have negative 3 because that cancels. Equal to 2 minus 1 is 1. I want to flip this over so that the y is on the left. When I flip it over, I had to flip my sign also. This was an or problem, so I have my or in there. Okay, this would be my answer. If I want to graph it, notice now that y is less than 5, so that would be here, going this way. Y is less than negative 3. Well, negative 3 doesn't even fit on here, but that's going to be over about here, right? It's going to be solid, and it's going to be going that way. Well, these would overlap over here, but it doesn't matter. That's all my graph is going to look like, because when these two overlap, I don't really care about the overlapping part because it's an or. If it was an and, I would only be able to keep this part over here. But again, if the graph is confusing, don't worry about it right now. That's not what we're doing today. Today is all about writing the answers down. If it's an or, make sure you have your or in it. If it has an and, make sure you put an and, or you put it down as the combination. It's actually going to ask you for a certain way.